When you think of Ontario, you picture Niagara Falls, endless lakes, and the glass towers of Toronto stabbing up into the sky. But underneath that postcard sits something colder and far more consolidated, an economy quietly owned, floor by floor and aisle by aisle, by a handful of families most people could not name, even if you paid them. We're talking about the invisible landlords who own the ground your warehouse sits on, the dynasties that decide what you eat, who your phone bill goes to, and which team you scream at on a Saturday night. Today, we expose the 8 richest families that own Ontario. These families don't chase the spotlight. They own the building the spotlight is bolted to. Number 8, the Zekelman family, the men who own the pipes. When people picture industrial wealth, they imagine something loud and visible, a factory with a name on the side, a tycoon cutting a ribbon. The Zekelman family built one of the largest fortunes in the province out of something you will never once think about, which is the humble steel tube. And that invisibility is precisely the point. The story starts in Windsor, Ontario, where Harry Zekelman founded a structural tubing company called Atlas Tube in 1984. Then, in 1986, tragedy rewrote everything because Harry died suddenly, and his son Barry, just 19 years old, walked away from university and took over a struggling family business almost nobody expected to survive. Most teenagers handed that situation would have folded it and taken the cash. Barry did the opposite. He became obsessed with the machinery, with squeezing every inefficiency out of the process, and he grew that single Ontario plant with under $1.5 million in sales into Zekelman Industries, the largest independent steel pipe and tube manufacturer in all of North America, pulling in north of $4 billion a year. And here's the maneuver that tells you exactly who these people are. In 2006, they sold a majority stake of the company to the private equity giant Carlyle Group for over $1 billion. Most families take that check and disappear onto a beach forever. The Zekelmans, 5 years later, bought their own company back. They wanted control more than they wanted to cash out, which in the billionaire world is genuinely rare. What the public fundamentally misunderstands about the Zekelmans is the sheer inescapability of what they make. People obsess over tech and software as if they run the world. But Barry Zekelman likes to point out that not one single dollar of GDP moves in this economy without steel. The tower going up downtown, the warehouse on the highway, the electrical conduit inside your walls, all of it runs through pipe. And a huge share of that pipe runs through a company owned by 3 brothers from Windsor with a combined fortune well into the billions. They don't sell you a product you notice. They sell the skeleton everything else hangs on. And Barry enjoys the winnings, racing Ferraris and cruising on a super yacht he named, with zero subtlety whatsoever, the Man of Steel. The Zekelmans own the pipes that hold the province up, but the next family figured out something even sneakier, that the most valuable land in Ontario is the flat, gray, boring kind nobody ever looks at twice. Number 7. The Fiedny family, the emperors of the flatlands. When people chase real estate wealth in Ontario, their eyes go straight up to the glass condos of downtown Toronto and the sprawling mansions of the Bridle Path. The Fiedny family looked in the exact opposite direction. They looked at the ground, out in Mississauga, the flat, featureless, endless industrial land that most people speed past without a single thought. And they realized that the boring gray box is the most reliable money-printing machine in the entire economy. The empire is called Orlando Corporation, and it goes back to 1948, when it was founded as Fiedny & Sons. Carlo Fiedny took the reins in 2000 after his father died, and today Orlando is one of the largest private industrial landlords in the country, owning, leasing, and managing more than 46 million square feet of industrial, office, and commercial space. Forbes pegs Carlo's fortune at around $4.5 billion, and he built almost none of it on anything glamorous. Here's their power move, and it's a quiet one. Instead of chasing the emotional, politically scrutinized, headline-grabbing world of housing, the Fiednys went all in on the unglamorous plumbing of commerce, the distribution centers and warehouses that every retailer on earth needs and none of them wants to own. They became the landlord to the supply chain itself. What the public misses about the Fiedny dynasty is where their boxes actually sit. This is prime land wrapped around the highways and the airport, the exact arteries through which physical goods flow into one of the biggest consumer markets in Canada. People think the money is in the product inside the box. The Fadanis prove the real money is in owning the box and the ground beneath it, and simply collecting rent while the rest of the world fights over what goes inside. Carlo has quietly given hundreds of millions to hospitals, which is how a family this invisible occasionally surfaces into public view at all. The Fadanis got rich owning the buildings other businesses need. The next man got rich building the one thing every single person needs, a place to live, and he built more of them than almost anyone alive. Speaking of spotting the one need everyone else walks right past, there's a program someone on our team has been curious about called the Billionaire Brain Wave. It's a simple 7-minute audio built around theta brainwave research, the deep focus brain state linked to where big creative ideas come from. You put on headphones once a day, usually with your morning coffee, and that's the whole routine. It's a one-time $39. It comes with bonus guides on money habits and investing basics, and there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. So testing it costs you nothing if it's not for you. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to number 6, and the man whose blueprint you might be living in. Number 6, the Gilgan family, the suburb machine. If you have driven through a newly built suburb anywhere in the Greater Toronto area in the last 40 years, there is a very strong chance you were driving through Peter Gilgan's imagination. Because this one man, starting from absolutely nothing, built the largest privately held home builder in all of North America. Gilgan grew up as one of 7 kids in a middle-class family, trained as a chartered accountant, which is about as unflashy a starting point as it gets, and in 1978 he built exactly one house in Ontario. 1. He named the company Mattamy, after his 2 oldest children, Matt and Amy, and from that single suburban home he compounded relentlessly, decade after decade, until Mattamy had built over 135,000 homes and helped house entire generations of Ontario families. His personal fortune now sits somewhere in the range of $6 billion. And here's the power move most people never clock. Gilgan didn't just build houses, he built whole planned communities from the raw ground up, buying enormous tracts of land, master planning the streets, the parks, the schools, the entire neighborhood, and then selling it all piece by piece. He wasn't a contractor waiting for a client. He was manufacturing towns and capturing the value of every single lot inside them. What the public fundamentally misunderstands about Gilgan is that the home building business looks slow and boring and low margin, right up until you do it 135,000 times while owning the land underneath. He turned the most basic human need on earth into one of the great Canadian fortunes, and then, in a genuinely staggering second act, he gave enormous chunks of it away, becoming the single largest hospital donor in Canadian history, with lifetime charitable giving north of $500 million, including a $100 million gift to Toronto's sick kids. The suburb machine turned out to have a conscience bolted to it. Gilgan feeds Ontario's need for shelter. The next family feeds something even more fundamental, and they got their start behind the counter of a McDonald's. Number 5. The Latifi family, the Meat Kings. Here is a fortune almost nobody in Ontario can see, attached to products almost everybody in Ontario has eaten. The Latifi family, through a company called Sofina Foods, quietly became one of the largest meat and food processors in the entire country, and they did it starting from about as far down the ladder as you can begin. Michael Latifi was born in Iran and immigrated to Canada as a teenager, and his first job in this country was working at McDonald's, not owning it, working in it. From there, he clawed his way up through the food industry until, in the 2000s, he assembled Sofina Foods out of a series of shrewd acquisitions, pulling together brands you have absolutely bought without ever knowing who owned them, names like Lilydale, Mastro, and Jane's. Today, Sofina is headquartered in Markham, Ontario, employs more than 13,000 people worldwide, and sits at the center of a fortune measured in the billions. Now here's the power move that made this family briefly famous for something other than food. In 2018, Michael Latifi spent around $270 million to buy a 10% stake in the McLaren Formula One team. And it was not a coincidence that his son, Nicholas Latifi, then spent several seasons racing in Formula One for Williams. The meat fortune quietly bought its way into the most glamorous, most expensive sport on the planet, What the public misses about the Latifis is the invisibility of dominance in the food supply. Everyone can name a car company or a phone company. Almost nobody can name the company that processes the chicken and the deli meat sitting in their fridge right now. That anonymity is the entire business model. While the world watched a Latifi race, a McLaren around Monaco on television, the actual engine of the family was humming away in a Markham processing plant, turning the most everyday purchase imaginable into a genuine dynasty. But while the Latifis feed the province in silence, the next family did the opposite. They built a stage and then made sure they owned every seat, every screen, and every camera pointed at it. Number 4. The Apostolopoulos family, the entertainment landlords. Most fortunes on this list hide from attention. The Apostolopoulos family decided to buy attention itself, the studios, the sound stages, the entertainment mega-projects, becoming the invisible landlords of the thing everyone else is looking at. The story is a pure immigrant epic. Andreas Apostolopoulos arrived in Canada from Greece in 1969 with essentially nothing, and he started at the very bottom, working as a laborer, then running an office cleaning business, then a plastic bag manufacturing operation. Unglamorous, grinding work. But he kept pushing that capital into commercial real estate and eventually founded the Triple Group of companies in Toronto, building a property empire now valued in the billions and run today by his sons, Steve, Peter, and Jim. And here's where they get interesting, because they didn't just buy boring office towers. Their holdings include Tribro Studios, which provides the actual physical filming locations for giants like Disney, Netflix, and Bell Media, and Durham Live, a sprawling 240-acre entertainment destination rising in Pickering, Ontario, complete with casino and hotels. There's even a moment of pure audacity in the family history when Andreas once bought the Pontiac Silverdome, the enormous former home of the Detroit Lions, for a fraction of what it once cost to build. What the public fundamentally misunderstands about the Apostolopoulos family is who really profits from the entertainment boom. People think the money is in the movie or the show. But the studios keep changing. The hit shows come and go. And through all of it, somebody owns the ground the cameras stand on and collects the rent no matter which production wins. The Apostolopoulos own the stage. They genuinely do not care which show is playing on it because either way, the check comes to them. That family owns the stages. The next family owns the airwaves those shows travel through and the teams that fill the arenas, and quite possibly the phone in your hand right now. Number 3. The Rogers family, the Signal Barons. There is a very good chance that at this exact moment, some part of your daily life is quietly routed through the Rogers family. Your cell signal, your internet, the cable box in your living room, the hockey game you're watching, the stadium it's played in. In Ontario, escaping the Rogers family is almost a full-time job. It began with one man and one radio station. Ted Rogers was a relentless, almost pathologically ambitious entrepreneur who took a single Toronto radio station and, through decades of aggressive, debt-fueled expansion, forged Rogers Communications into one of the largest telecommunications and media empires in the country. When Ted died in 2008, he left behind a corporate machine that touches nearly every screen in the province, now steered by his son, Edward Rogers, with a family fortune estimated around $12 billion. And the power move of the last few years is pure, undisguised empire building. In 2025, Rogers spent $4.5 billion to seize majority control of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, the crown jewel that owns the Maple Leafs, the Raptors, and Toronto FC. Then they signed an $11 billion deal to keep exclusive NHL broadcast rights locked up until 2038. So they own the teams, and they own the network those teams are broadcast on, and they own the pipes that carry the broadcast into your house. Read that sequence again, because it's a closed loop with no exit. What the public fundamentally misunderstands about the Rogers dynasty is that it isn't really a phone company or a sports company or a media company. It's all three fused into a single, unavoidable toll booth. When you watch the Leafs lose on a Saturday night, you might be paying the Rogers family 3 separate times without noticing, for the team, for the broadcast, and for the internet you streamed it on. Behind it all sits a genuinely bitter family succession drama worthy of its own television series. A boardroom war between Ted's children over who controls the whole thing, which only proves how much power is actually stacked inside this one family's hands. The Rogers family controls the signal. The next family controls something even more basic and even harder to avoid, the food on your table, and they've been doing it for over 100 years. Number 2. The Weston family, the bread dynasty. If the Rogers family is almost impossible to avoid, the Weston family is completely impossible to avoid, because you cannot eat in Ontario without, somewhere along the line, paying them. This is the family that turned a single loaf of bread into one of the largest fortunes in the country. It started in 1882 when George Weston, the original, opened a modest bread business in Toronto. 4 generations later, that bakery has metastasized into an absolute leviathan. Through George Weston Limited and its crown jewel, Loblaw, the family controls the largest grocery empire in Canada, an empire that includes Loblaws, No Frills, Shoppers Drug Mart, Fortinos, and the President's Choice and no-name brands sitting in millions of Canadian pantries right now. Galen Weston Jr., the current face of the dynasty, carries a personal fortune estimated around $20 billion. Here's the power move that defines them, and it's about vertical control. The Westons don't just own the grocery stores. Through their various arms, they've had their hands on the products on the shelves, the brands people reach for, and the pharmacy counter at the back. They built an ecosystem where you enter for milk, fill a prescription, grab a President's Choice frozen dinner, and the money flows at every single step back toward the same family. What the public fundamentally misunderstands about the Westons is just how total that grip really is, and it turned genuinely uncomfortable for them recently. During the food inflation surge of the pandemic years, Galen Weston became, fairly or not, the public face of grocery prices in Canada, the man Canadians pictured when their grocery bill doubled. And that backlash reveals the raw truth of their position, that in a country where the grocery business has been swallowed by a tiny few, the Westons sit at the very top of the pile. You can boycott a brand. It is genuinely difficult to boycott the family that owns the store, the pharmacy, and half the products inside both. The Westons feed the province and take a cut of nearly every meal. But even a 140-year grocery empire and a $20 billion fortune isn't the top of this list. Because there is one family whose wealth is so vast it makes everyone we've discussed so far look almost small. Number 1. The Thompson family, the invisible empire. To call the Thompsons the richest family in Ontario is a wild understatement. They are the richest family in all of Canada by an enormous margin, sitting on a fortune estimated at around $90 billion. That is not a typo. 90 billion. At that altitude, the number stops feeling like money and starts feeling like a force of nature, and yet most people in Ontario could pass David Thompson on the street and have no idea they just walked past the most powerful private fortune in the nation. The origin is pure Ontario. Roy Thompson was born in Toronto, and in 1934, he bought his first small newspaper up in Timmins. From that single struggling paper, he began assembling newspapers and radio stations, and the empire grew so influential that Roy was eventually made a British lord, becoming Baron Thompson of Fleet. But the real genius of this dynasty is what came after. Because unlike almost every other media family on Earth, the Thompsons saw the death of traditional media coming and got out of the way in time. Here's the power move, and it's a masterclass in reinvention. Instead of clinging to dying newspapers, the family pivoted hard into something far more durable, the business of information itself. Through Thomson Reuters, they came to dominate the flow of financial data, legal databases, and professional information that banks, law firms, and governments literally cannot operate without. Their holding company, Woodbridge, holds a roughly 70% stake in Thomson Reuters and quietly owns other trophies too, including the Globe and Mail and pieces of NHL teams. They didn't sell information to the public. They sold the essential information that the powerful pay for on subscription forever. What the public fundamentally misunderstands about the Thompson family is the sheer, deliberate quietness of it. David Thompson, the reclusive patriarch and the third Baron Thompson of Fleet, is one of the great art collectors on the planet, and the family has donated hundreds of works to the Art Gallery of Ontario. And yet they move through the world almost invisibly, with none of the noise of a fortune, a fraction of their size. That is the final lesson of the richest family in the country. The loudest wealth is almost never the biggest. The biggest wealth builds an empire out of information so essential and so unglamorous that the rest of us never even notice we're standing inside it. At $90 billion, the Thompsons don't need Ontario to know their name. Ontario already runs on their machine, and these were the richest families that own Ontario. All of these dynasties prove that Ontario is a fortress of privately held, multi-generational wealth, controlled by families who mastered the same quiet art, owning the essential thing rather than the flashy one. The pipe instead of the tower. The warehouse instead of the penthouse. The grocery store instead of the meal. They built the suburbs, they wired the signal, and they stocked the shelves, largely in silence, while the rest of us paid the toll without ever reading the sign. To keep tracking the hidden money that shapes the world you actually live in, like this video and subscribe to Global Status.